Returning now to one of our top stories and the war between Israel and Hamas. United Nations members have voted to grant the Palestinian territories new rights and privileges. It's also seen as moving the Palestinian delegation one step closer to full membership at the UN. Journalist Sally Patterson is monitoring the developments and joins us once again from New York. Sally, can you tell us more about what's happened in this vote?
Well, we've seen quite a dramatic morning so far here in New York, as is often the case at the United Nations, where representatives rarely miss the opportunity to make the most of their time addressing their fellow members. What we've seen so far today is that vote passed very easily through the United Nations General Assembly, the vast majority of member states deciding that, yes, they think the Palestinian authorities, the Palestinian territories, should have more rights and privileges than they currently do. As it stands, they are an observer state, so they have very limited rights within the world body. But under this new resolution, they would be granted rights such as sitting with the rest of the members on the General Assembly hall floor, and they will also be allowed to engage in debates, put forward amendments, and really take much more of an opportunity to engage in those wider proceedings that we see happening at the United Nations most days of the week. And so it's a real push, both in terms of what they can physically do, but actually also in terms of what this means more metaphorically as well, because what we've seen here is this really demand by the vast majority of members in the General Assembly saying, yes, we back the Palestinian territories to have more of a stake here in this world body and perhaps in the end become a state in its own right. Now, we heard from the representative of the Palestinian territories, Riyad Mansour. He addressed the other members and he spoke very powerfully and at times got quite emotional when addressing the rest of the General Assembly. Here's what he had to say.
You can decide to stand by the right of a nation to live in freedom and dignity on its ancestral land, to stand with peace, which requires the recognition of our rights, not their continued denial. Or you can stand on the sidelines of history, or worse, obstruct its natural path forward.
But it wasn't all positive. It wasn't all words of support taking place at the General Assembly. We heard very strong language indeed from Israel's representative, Gilad Erdan, who strongly condemned this resolution and said that allowing it to pass was giving rights to a terror entity. Erdan accused the representative for the Palestinian territories of supporting Hamas's October 7th attack, or at least not condemning them, when we saw more than 1,200 Israelis killed and many others taken hostage, where many remain in Gaza. Here's more on what he had to say.
In the 1940s, the world united to destroy a murderous regime. Yet today, with sick and twisted irony, the very body established to prevent evil is now welcoming a terror state into its ranks. What would Churchill say if he were alive today? What would Roosevelt think? They are turning in their graves, turning.
Now, Erdan really used very strong language there to condemn this resolution, and he even ripped up a version of the UN Charter because he says that's what other members had done. They were shredding, in his words, the UN Charter and everything that it stands for. Back to you.
You know, Sally, of the nations that abstained, it's worth us noting that Canada was one of the countries that chose to abstain for this vote as well, even though it overwhelmingly was passed. I just wonder, in practical terms, what happens now?
Well, several countries chose to abstain because this really isn't a simple thing that we've seen happen here in New York, because whilst, yes, the Palestinian territories do now have more rights under UN rules. They aren't a fully fledged member of the United Nations. In order for that to happen, it needs to pass a resolution as well through the United Nations Security Council. Now, last month, that was attempted. A resolution was put forward for that council to vote on, and it failed. And that's because the United States used its veto votes. It's one of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, and therefore has special rights to be able to basically stop a resolution in its tracks. The US says that as things stand, this is not the way to achieve peace in the Middle East. They say that really this is not supporting ongoing diplomatic efforts on the ground. They say that right now the Palestinian territories don't have what it takes, don't constitute a state under UN rules, and therefore it says it will continue to block any attempts to become a state in its own right. Natasha.
Sally Patterson in New York, thank you.